Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Casey Jacobowski, PhD from the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and one of the co-authors of 50 Tips for New Teachers. Today, I'd like to share with you one of the major points of Tip 28. What does equity look like in your classroom? To me, it means being aware of not only our visible difference, but our invisible differences. I'd like to recommend to everybody that you think very strongly about your actions as a teacher to ensure that you create a comfort and welcoming environment for all of your students, that you honor and celebrate not only their characteristics as an individual, but collaboratively as a class, that you have open and honest dialogues, and that you are willing to ensure that your work as an educator is one that promotes the best opportunities for everybody, no matter what. Equity is not a nice to have, it's a must have. And I hope that you will join me in understanding that in our classroom, what is taught is representative of not only the teacher's experiences, but their students as well. And if you don't understand, ask the librarian for help researching. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy this one small thought about equity.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Matt Rhodes, and we're talking about tip number 28 and Crush It from the Start, 50 Tips for New Teachers, and it's called Developing Equity for Sanity's Sake. And I'm going to first talk about that and what it looks like in your learning space. And that can essentially be providing content so that students can practice that content and access that content whenever and wherever through your LMS, and thinking about strategies of incorporating teaching and learning is through incorporating maybe the direct instruction, that 3 to 5 minute clip of a couple elements that you did that day or during the week, providing opportunities for students to complete that assignment digitally, as well as they can do it on paper and pencil, or provide another modality such as recording or them creating an infographic, creating that student embedded choice after you've taught them how to initially create those mediums. Another element of equity in your learning space is being culturally responsive, celebrating the cultures in your class by learning more about them and incorporating them into the content and lessons that you're teaching your students, and using those texts from authors and those in pop culture that relate to who your students are as people and where they come from. And that's it for thinking about developing equity for Sanity's sake in your learning space.
So in my teaching space, there are two really key terms that fit into how I do equity work in the classroom. And the first one, and I think this is the most important, is co-constructed, right? So if I, as the teacher, apply what I think is equity practice to my students, what I'm still doing is I am creating an experience for them with my assumptions and my biases that what I'm doing is going to be right for them or best for them or will adapt to their culture, their experiences, better than what they could actually construct with me or on their own. So as I deal with equity in the classroom, my first thought is always, how do I involve students in real decision-making processes in the classroom with how it functions? What curriculum are we using? How are we going to learn it? How are we going to test it, measure it, see growth, and celebrate growth, right? All of those kind of questions have to be answered together. If it's answered by you as the teacher alone, it's very difficult to put in that equity work that's going to liven up your classroom. And the second term that I think is really key is radical love. So this is a concept in critical pedagogy. And, the real foundation of it is we are talking about, as you teach, you are doing this as an act of service, as an act of love. You are doing this not to harm, but only to help. And you cannot do that by pushing what you want onto students. It's really a combined shared effort. So co-constructing, radical love. These two terms I think can make any classroom a more equitable and safe space.
A lot has changed in question 2 in my personal career about how I viewed equity since I first started teaching. As a young novice teacher in rural schools, I realized that equity is really trying to do your best to ensure, as an educator, you create a classroom that is designed to be strengths-based. I also realized that as I was looking at Cross et al.'s cultural competency model, that the more you know, the more you support, and the more you value is crucial. You also need to do the hard work, read the resources, go and find the answers to the questions without asking questions to people under the expectation that they're going to do the hard work for you. This emotional labor is quite often something that creates major problems, because individuals who are often expected to do the work are representatives of themselves, and yet they are cast into representatives of their groups. So be aware that your responsibility is to do more than go, oh, that's nice. Do the work, do the planning, do the research. Ask questions in ways that are demonstrative of your background knowledge that you've done the research first.
So in my teaching space, there are two really key terms that fit into how I do equity work in the classroom. And the first one, and I think this is the most important, is co-constructed, right? So if I, as the teacher, apply what I think is equity practice to my students, what I'm still doing is I am creating an experience for them with my assumptions and my biases that what I'm doing is going to be right for them or best for them or will adapt to their culture, their experiences, better than what they could actually construct with me or on their own. So as I deal with equity in the classroom, my first thought is always, how do I involve students in real decision-making processes in the classroom with how it functions? What curriculum are we using? How are we going to learn it? How are we going to test it, measure it, see growth, and celebrate growth, right? All of those kind of questions have to be answered together. If it's answered by you as the teacher alone, it's very difficult to put in that equity work that's going to liven up your classroom. And the second term that I think is really key is radical love. So this is a concept in critical pedagogy. And, the real foundation of it is we are talking about, as you teach, you are doing this as an act of service, as an act of love. You are doing this not to harm, but only to help. And you cannot do that by pushing what you want onto students. It's really a combined shared effort. So co-constructing, radical love. These two terms I think can make any classroom a more equitable and safe space.
Hi, I'm Dr. Matt Rhodes, and we're talking about tip number 28 in Crush It from the Start, 50 Tips for New Teachers, and it's called Developing Equity for Sandy's Sake. And I'm going to talk about how my view of equity has changed since my first year teaching, and it has completely changed as I really truly had to understand my biases and where I come from, and really had to engage with a wide variety of students from all different types of backgrounds for me to really think about where I've come from and where they've come from, and really trying to, bridge those various gaps that we have. And I have to think about, what were things that I had growing up that certain students may have or may not have. And I have to think about, how are we really supporting our students in giving them the opportunity to try their best to make gains, not only academically, but socially, as well as in whatever they want to achieve. So that's kind of where I have really grown. And ultimately, it's a journey and it takes time. And know that you're not going to be perfect, and it's not a black and white issue. It's something where you see growth over time.
I think what makes blind spots really hard is if you look at the statistics in education, a majority of teachers are going to be white female. And then, that second layer will be white male. And there's not a lot of diversity in the profession itself. And this profession doesn't necessarily encourage or promote diversity in a lot of aspects. So it's very difficult to remove your blind spots when you're surrounded by people who may have had very similar upbringings, experiences, cultures, religions that you've experienced. So when we think about blind spots, it's really about asking the community in which you're teaching. So it's not just about, going up to another teacher and saying, hey, can you observe my lesson? Haha, with our free time. But, it's not enough to say, hey, let me grab a couple teachers in, check out what I'm doing, and let me know what you think and if my practices are equitable. Yes, you should get some experience from people who are engaging in pedagogy, engaging in curriculum work, people who kind of know what they're doing in the education space. But I think where we miss out is asking the community to be in your classroom. Can you imagine, teacher, what would happen if you asked members of your community, parents, people who just happen to live there who maybe don't even have children, but are ingrained in the community, are well respected and well known in that area, and say, hey, can you come into my classroom? Maybe even offer them an opportunity to be a guest speaker. And then say, hey, can you look at what I'm doing and tell me, does this work that I'm doing fit in with this community that I am teaching? Let the people from the actual community guide you.
Question 3 is so important. One of the first points that I'd like to share with you is you as an educator must understand that their experience is more important than our own. You also need to go out and become actively engaged and involved in as many different situations and experiences in as many different places as possible. Now, in the United States, one of the areas that we are blessed with is regional, unique history, culture, and folkways. Sometimes it can even be local, where going 2 miles or 5 miles can bring you into a whole different world to meet a whole different group of people. Especially for folks who have stayed very close to home. It's not a bad idea to go out and experience the world. Second, read widely. Don't settle for books that don't make you think or don't challenge you. Read widely. And finally, and this is where I believe most crucially, listen to many different podcasts. Find them. Understand what the people are trying to say. Understand the unique approaches. You have opportunities. You have power. You have connections. We have, for the first time ever, one of the most powerful means of experiential learning available to us. It is within your grasp.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Matt Rhodes, and we're focusing on tip number 28, developing equity for Sanity's sake. And we're talking about this notion of how do we overcome certain blind spots we have when it comes to equity. And I think that comes down to really reflecting and writing about who you are, where you came from, as well as really getting to know your students and your community and building those relationships with those individuals over time. And know that you're not going to be perfect, and you're going to at times be more equitable as well as more inequitable at times. So you do go back and forth, and ultimately I think to overcome those blind spots is to try to incorporate more equitable strategies in your practice and just be more accepting and really trying to think of equity in everything that you do.
Schools are the place. They are the place where equity happens. It's essential that as educators we realize schools are designed to provide individuals with opportunities above and beyond and where they want to go. If we limit equity because of our own actions, our own beliefs, our own processes, we're gatekeeping. As you think about what a school or a district should do in order to encourage equity, it's got to go beyond the basics. It must be positive, proactive, and profound. If you are not sure if your actions are helping, step back for a moment and check. This example is really critical for equity. Have you thought about a diabetic? Do you serve meals that are heavy on carbohydrates and sugars, whether they be natural or not? That's not equity. Are you serving food that somebody is going to get sick off of? That's little. But more importantly, are you misgendering somebody? Are you not understanding their culture, their history, their traditions, their individuality? The individual is crucial. And just like we all know, some of us are really good swimmers. Some of us can run. Others of us cannot do that.
So the bigger role of equity in the school and district level, I don't know that this always gets portrayed well, but I think the key indicator of what they're doing should be autonomy, right? Because equity work is going to look different from classroom to classroom, from student population to student population, and even within a school. There are so many different needs. When you talk about special education, when you talk about fulfilling the work of IEPs and 504 plans, then you talk about English language learners and the specific needs of different groups, maybe who's an English language learner from one country or language versus another. So every single student has an individualized context in which you may, as the teacher, need to make adjustments to your class, to policies, to procedures, to how you evaluate and grade to be equitable for that student and for that group of students. So at a school and district job, really what you're looking at is how can we create more autonomy for teachers? And then to really play that out, what resources do those teachers need so that as we're providing autonomy, we're also giving a structure where teachers can access what they need, whether it be training, could be resources, education technology that can help bridge some gaps, so that they're able to carry out the equity work in the most effective fashion and in the way that's going to produce the goals of the school and keep everybody moving forward at their best rate.
Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Matt Rhodes, and I'm a co-author of Crushing from the Start, 50 Tips for New Teachers. And we're talking about tip number 28 today, which is developing equity for Sandy's sake. And we're talking about, what is the bigger role of equity in education within your schools and districts. And just know that you have only so many resources in the classroom as a teacher. And there's a lot that comes from school, district, and state policy. And ultimately, I think our goal is in the classroom is to try and take those resources that we have at our disposal and try to provide equitable opportunities, and know that at the end of the day, you're only going to be able to provide as much as that you're given, and that you have that mindset of uncovering our biases, trying to build relationships with our community and our students, and trying to provide as many strategies as we can to be as equitable as possible in our practice. And it's hopefully a conversation that you talk about often in your practice, as reflecting and really thinking about it can help us grow in that as an educator and person.